So this is the sleep setup. We got an uneven ground here, kind of slopes down, which I like because that means the water's going to run down here. But what I did was I collected a whole bunch of pine needles and made about an 8-inch bed of pine needles. You got to make sure that you don't got like rocks and sticks and pine cones in those needles, otherwise you're going to have lumps that are going to be really uncomfortable at night. And then this is the silicone impregnated polyester sheet, and underneath that sheet is, can't really see it, but underneath the sheet is my poncho. So the poncho's folded over several times. So there's pine needles, then the poncho, then the silicone sheet, then the bivy sack. And then up here, my thermals and all my gear are packed in the bag. So the bag acts as a pillow. And then water, food, charging station, cleaning, that's all there. And then the rifle's right there. So if for some reason I get like a flash rainstorm tonight, not only do I have the Gore-Tex bivy, but I have all of this extra sheet that I can pull over me. And then tomorrow when the sun comes out and it gets hot, I basically use these trees here to set up a cordage system, and the sil poly sheet ends up being a sunshade for me. I just set that up with my wooden button beads and some short lengths of cord, and I can show you that later. But that's pretty much it. It doesn't take too long to set up, and it's pretty much, easy to carry. And I've used this specific kit with my merino wool down to about 42, 43 degrees, and was able to get sleep. Maybe it was a little bit cold, like early in the morning. But the nice thing about this sil poly sheet here is when you pull it over the bivy sack, it adds an additional sealed layer of insulation, and keeps you pretty warm. The merino is critical. The merino is a mid-weight merino wool. I think they're like 350 weight, and yeah, good to go. So rifle, knife, pistol, right? This is kind of my workstation, food, that kind of stuff. All the other kit stuff is in the bag, and then above that is the merino, which acts as a pillow. And yeah, this keeps me dry and warm down to lower 40s if I need it. The other interesting thing is this is a windy ridge here, but the wind is coming over that side of the ridge. So this is actually very still air in here. There's not a lot of wind chill in this area, so that works out pretty good. And then behind me, the hillside drops down. So I'm in an elevated position. There's a rocky cliff line on that side. The water drains down here. I've got rocky buttress here below my sleeping area, which kind of supports me. Water can drain down around both edges, and then I have the entire view, approach view down here, and this is where you actually hike up. So I got the entire approach view. I can see all the way up here too. So it's a pretty good spot, relatively protected, and then around this side is more rocky cliff line. So that's it. That's how I set it up. That's how I go lightweight. No sleeping bag, no pad, no sleeping pad, no sleeping bag, no tent, none of that stuff. You just utilize a few items like a silicone impregnated sheet, a poncho, a bivy sack. They're all pretty thin, but if you layer them properly, you can stay warm. And the other thing is they all kind of, everything doubles as additional kit. Like I can use it as a rainfly, or I can build a lean-to, or I can use the sil poly sheet as a cloak. So if it's pouring down rain, I can either put my poncho on, or I can roll up the sheet and fold it around me and pin it on me with a couple of those button beads, wooden button beads, and I've got a cloak, a hunting cloak. So yeah, that's the minimalist kit. That's what I wanted, because you gotta be light. You gotta be able to go fast. You know, you need to learn how to deal with discomfort. You gotta be light. You gotta be able to go fast. And I don't want to carry a lot of equipment. I don't particularly like carrying a backpack if I can avoid it. In the winter, when I bring a sleeping bag, yeah, I'll bring a backpack. The other thing is, it's been raining for the last couple weeks, so for some reason it got really cold tonight. I could very easily build a little fire right here. I could make a little fire circle right here, build a fire here. There is an insane amount of wood up here and pine needles and stuff, so fire starting, fire building is not difficult. Plenty of rocks and stuff like that. But you know, down here, if I made a fire circle down here, I would just simply pull back this sheet. I'd set up a rock ring, a small one, you know, like an 8-inch rock ring, and I'd just build a little fire. And you know, that would be emotionally reinforcing, at least. I don't know how much heat it would give me, but the fire building activity in itself makes you warmer, and the flame makes you happy. You know, it's very comforting. So if it were to, for some reason, to drop into the 30s or something like that, I just get up and build a fire. But since we are mission-wise, you know, in a non-permissive environment, I'm set up to like not be giving off any light or smoke. And you know, you'd only build the fire if you absolutely needed to for survival. The other thing is it's a short duration, short distance mission. So if I really needed to, something happened, I could pack up and get back to home base very quickly. Very quickly. Anyway, this is the Owl signing off. $18 feet, 6 feet extra. harbor knot with a locking overhand. That's an overhand slip knot. Down here, we use the overhand slip loop around the pole, another half hitch slip, and then a locking bar. Same thing here, overhand slip with a loop. This goes around the pole, half hitch slip, locking bar. Very simple knots. That's all you need for a simple ridge line. Okay, these are wooden beads I bought online. You can get like 150 of them for $8, and they're soaked in boiled linseed oil. Soaked them for a couple hours in boiled linseed oil, which will polymerize in the wood and make them a lot stronger. I like them because they're a little bit over a ½ inch, so they're great for button beads, which means you put them up inside the tarp like this, and you capture them in the tarp with a clove hitch. So this is the clove hitch. Pretty simple, straightforward knot. It's got an overhand knot here as a locking knot, just to make sure it doesn't slide. That's the bead captured in the tarp. It's called a button bead. You can use this for tarp corners. You can use this for midline ridge lines. You can use this to bring, the tarp around you like a cloak. There's like a whole bunch of different uses. Clove hitch around the base of the button bead. It's going to capture the tarp around the button. The nice thing about the beads is they're smooth. So you could use a pine cone or a rock or a fat short twig, but it'll wear out your cloth a lot quicker. So I like to keep the beads. And there you have it. Button bead captured in the tarp. Clove hitch and a locking overhand knot. So notice I carry a lot of these. I mean, you only need like 4 or 5 of these, but there's always the possibility they're going to get lost. The other thing is you can share these with people. You could probably trade them. They're really useful, and so I got extra in case I lose them, or in case somebody else in my group may need them. And then you can also use these as pace beads, so you can count your paces with these. And I like them big for that, so when I'm walking and I'm counting paces, I can move the beads easily and keep track of them easily. So I just like this. This is a very useful tool. Now you can have a tarp with sewn in loops, but it can limit your options, and it also, is a permanent change on the tarp. If I want to use this tarp as a cloak, like a hunting cloak, I don't want a bunch of sewn in loops hanging around while I'm walking through the brush. So that's why I've opted for the button beads. And it may be a little bit less convenient, but but it's worth it for me, because it allows me to use my tarp for a lot of different purposes without additional work to sew in or stitch in loops. Okay, so this is the lower back corner of the tarp. It's got a button bead with a clove hitch, overhand slip knot up here around the base of this support pole, and half hitch slip knot with a locking bar. And that is the technique I use to keep the lower corners down on the tarp. Same thing over here at the lower corner of the tarp. Clove hitch, locking knot, and then this goes around the pole, 2 half hitches with a locking peg. And this pole is butted up against the base of this tree, so it's good, pretty solid. So there you have it. That's the button bead configuration. It's actually pretty quick to do if you're not demonstrating it. The beads allow me to put an anchor point anywhere I want on the tarp, which is really nice. It's got a low configuration for good concealment and also for heat retention. You could put it even lower if it was, say, like snowing, or if it was in winter conditions. I've got 2 steel water bottles, right? So if it rains, I can position those water bottles anywhere that water is coming off the tarp. The center button is there to keep the tarp from collecting water, to keep water from pooling on the tarp. And I can adjust that center button anywhere on that branch if I need to. As a matter of fact, any of this configuration can be adjusted as needed. So it's not your typical rapid ridgeline, but it's very versatile, especially if you're using a sheet, you know, like a silicone impregnated sheet. And if you don't have a typical setup as far as your poles are concerned, you know, if you got trees in weird directions, or if you're using rocks like boulders, like if I were to set up my tarp up there in that notch with boulders and rocks, button beads would come in very, very handy. And they double as paste beads. So if you're going to be carrying paste beads anyway, you might as well use them as button beads if needed. So keep in mind, I got way more than I need here, so I can set up a shelter or 2 shelters, or share the beads with somebody, and I still have leftover beads for pacing. So that's it. What we'll do is we'll go back a ways and see how it looks from a distance. So this is about 40 yards away. So that's going to be relatively concealed to anybody who's like several hundred yards away. Anybody who's not paying attention, I'm going to have some concealment there, and an element, possibly element of surprise, or at least I'll have some time to get ready if somebody's approaching. Now this isn't optimum concealment. If I wanted optimum concealment, I'd set up my tarp up in these rocks here, and use the beads to make the shelter look like a boulder. Maybe we'll do that next time. But right now I got the cozy, comfortable situation because I'm just kind of enjoying myself.